Good morning to all. Thank you very much. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands we meet and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, both here in Cairns and across the Great Barrier Reef where this work is being done. So today I'm going to be talking about the Site Stewardship Framework that is currently in development to assist tourism operators by using the best available knowledge and monitoring tools to help them inform decisions that are made at site level, so at the sites that they visit each day. And these decisions they're going to be making are about any actions that they intend to take at their site, whether it be site intervention or small-scale actions. So the framework itself is split into or guided by 5 key principles. The first 3 principles up there basically guide the last 2. So the key to this framework is protecting your site, obviously protecting the site and making sure that you are doing or conducting actions with the reef health at the forefront, and also working with traditional owners and making sure traditional values are respected is priority. Knowing your site, if you are going to conduct site intervention or conduct any action at your site, it is key to know what's going on at your site and understand your site. And then interpretation and education. So the tourism operators are obviously the face of the reef. They are the people out there that are talking to the public, and these are the groups out on the reef that are inspiring all of these people to fight for protection of the reef. So it is very important that the key messages are very clear and in line with what is best for the reef. Once these 3 principles, I guess, are working well within that organisation, then you start to look at whether managing disturbances is something that the organisation will want to get involved in, and then further from that, trialling interventions at site level. So what I'm going to talk about today is the development of the Site Stewardship Plans. So at the moment, there's 26 tourism operators as part of the Tourism Reef Protection Initiative. Some of you might have been over at Justin's talk earlier, which would have given you a bit more information on that. But basically, each of these tourism operators were given the opportunity to pick their primary site, so one site that they visit daily, weekly, and working together with the authority, produce a Site Stewardship Plan. And these plans will guide the further development of the framework to make sure that we're incorporating all operator types in the decisions around building this framework. So you can see there's a good spread all the way from the southern Great Barrier Reef up to the northern Great Barrier Reef, with a range of different operators involved. I won't go through all of the components from environmental protection, but what I did just want to give you a quick visual here. I know you can't read the writing unless you're very close, but this demonstrates the variability in all these operators. So we sat down with each of the managers from the operators and talked about what they're doing at their site, whether it be what experiences they're offering or what they're doing to best protect their site. So you can see there's a range of different answers coming from all these operators. So the reason this is good to have a big pool of operators is to ensure that we are including everyone. Knowing your site. So this is where I'm going to provide a little bit of the data that were being captured from the tourism operators. So as mentioned before, knowing your site is imperative. It's the most important thing before you engage in intervention is to have a baseline understanding of what that site should look like in best case scenario, and then know what needs to be done to try and mitigate any disturbance that may occur at that site. So this is all centred around the Eye on the Reef program. So the Eye on the Reef program, there's 4 main survey techniques. Tourism Weekly is the repeat technique that is done in very high frequency, obviously weekly, that's where the weekly bit comes from. And the Reef Health Impact Surveys, these are more sporadic, but operators are also doing the Reef Health Impact Surveys within their stewardship sites. Rapid monitoring is for schools and guests led by trained staff, and sightings network is available for everyone. If anyone isn't familiar with Eye on the Reef, the app is downloadable and you can read about it on the website. So what we've been doing with working with these operators is really getting to understand that the information that these repeat visitors, everyone who's working out on the reef daily, they know more about these sites than anyone knows about any site. There's some operator staff that we've been working closely with that have been working on a site for 15 or 20 years, going 5 days a week. So the information that these guys have is imperative. So we're putting that into the plan to try and combine the best available science with the observations that are coming from these operators to try and get a true, full, holistic understanding of that site. And just tides, wind, currents. One thing, that top one where you can see the current data, current as in water movement, not a point in time or a fruit. But the top left one there, you can see the observations from this operator. Even the modelling data, obviously, at this point can't give you an indication of when that tide is going to change, exactly when it's going to change, but these operators knew exactly 1.5 metres after that tide change starts to go out, you get slack and eddies forming in the middle of the channel, and then 3 to 6 hours beyond that, the current runs the other way. So just getting all of this information captured to help build that understanding of these sites is really important. We're also looking at species diversity, so we're doing fish diversity counts and coral diversity counts within the Tourism Weekly swathe. So the Tourism Weekly path, that survey they're doing every week, is 200 metres by 10 metres, so it's about 2,000 square metres in area, and we're working with the operators to get an understanding of what species, so what are the most abundant species they're seeing at this point in time, and what is the range of species by doing a species richness grid. We're also doing coral diversity grids. So obviously, as we know, one of the biggest risks with the changing climate is loss of species. So I'm glad we did it this year because we were able to get out to go to all these sites when coral cover was at a record, in some spots, record high amount of coral cover, but we're also able to look at the species diversity and get a snapshot of what species are at this site or at these sites at this point in time. So obviously there's a lot of interesting data that come from it as well, comparing different sites, but you get an inshore reef and an outer reef. Outer reef has a higher number of acropora species, inshore reef has a higher number of soft coral species. So there's a lot of information that come out of that, but really this is to get that baseline understanding at site level. And it's important to, what the staff are out there doing is taking close-up photos so we can just understand how many species. We're not asking them to name them because, as you know, tomorrow that acropora species will be different anyway. So we're asking them to take a photo because that coral will always be that coral, and down the track we can revisit these, or the staff can revisit these and know what species they had at this point in time at their site. This is a bit of an indication of the species richness across the tourism sites, and Whitsundays being the highest diversity on average. A lot of the Whitsundays operators are operating out of bays that were protected from Cyclone Debbie. As Cyclone Debbie came through, a lot of operators moved their operation to in bays, and it's likely that low disturbance history could have contributed to that high diversity. Also I like photos, by the way, if anyone hasn't realised. If there's not 400 photos in my presentation, there's something wrong. So this is an idea of we're getting the operators to get images of the monument corals, the big parietes and the tabulate corals, the plate corals as well. These are the corals, as we know, that have survived the most disturbances and have been here the longest, so tracking these over time is really important. As part of this program, we're also getting these operators to really look at change during the summer period. We had a pretty turbulent summer, this one. There was a range of different disturbances that crossed a range of different tourism sites. So keeping track of these coral gardens, we've got a couple of examples of what tourism operators have supplied. So this is one of the sites that was impacted by Cyclone Jasper, and this was only impacted by wave damage. You can see on the left, beautiful garden, on the right, the acropora branching bushy, and table corals were flipped, and for some reason the spaghetti cineraria had disappeared. So just an indication of how cyclones impact their site at that particular level is important information for these operators to know as well prior to going into intervention. This one was really interesting. So this site was impacted by freshwater bleaching and heat stress in early January. Without that photo down there in December, without these repeat visits, we wouldn't have been able to attribute the disturbance to what actually happened, whether it was freshwater or heat, because there wouldn't have been a time series that included that it was clearly the freshwater that impacted this site. So having the operators being able to understand this kind of thing is very important. And here's an example of heat stress from this year. So this is a site that fed pretty well. The bushy branching acroporas impacted, but most other coral morphology is not too bad. I'm going to flick through these because of time. We're also doing site resilience observation surveys to get a resilience score for these sites, which we can revisit over time as well. So as mentioned before, the education, these are the people talking to everyone in the reef. It's really important that the knowledge is up to date and that the key messaging is in line with what needs to be distributed. The managing disturbance section, this is really, I didn't mention this before, but the key managing disturbance actions that are going on at the moment are COTS, cranithorns and drupella removal. The other one, as part of a response to both cyclones this year, Part 5.4, giving exemption, giving operators an exemption to go out and flip or rewrite corals that have flipped in the cyclone. That was a temporary exemption, so there are a lot of operators that were involved in that. So that's assisted natural recovery. And then the interventions are those more intense efforts that operators are making. So before the ultimate goal here of the Site Stewardship Framework is to create a framework that will both guide the operators but also potentially allow operators to get a permit to do site intervention. At the moment, all permits need to be research permits for intervention, but it's not always the case where the operator or there is a research goal. It is a lot of the time, obviously it is always at the moment, but a lot of the operators particularly want to do one simple intervention at their site and there's no research goal. They just want to increase diversity to small patch. So we're looking at the potential of heading in that direction. There's a bit of a long way to go yet. An example of the intervention techniques up around Cairns, lots of different options from coral clips to Mars stars to a range of different nursery types. Example of some of the intervention techniques down in the southern Great Barrier Reef. So there has been a lot trialled on the Great Barrier Reef already, and hopefully with the range of different trials and options for operators and a well-informed history of that site, the best decisions can be made. So the Site Stewardship Framework fits into the High Standard Tourism Operator Program, which is in line with the outcomes, strategies and plans that are set in place for protection of the reef in the future. What will come of this and where we're at the moment, so the Site Stewardship Plans are due in 43 days. I know there's a couple of people in this room who are part of that program, and once that comes in, educational materials will be made of that so they can actually present this to the guests they have on board. And then the Site Steward Framework will be finalised and developed and put out for review, and a site stewardship decision-making tool will be developed to make this more streamlined, and that will be part of the permitting process should we go down the path of allowing tourism operators to get permits to do intervention on their own. Thanks.
Questions?
One
question?
Hey, Johnny, just thanks for that, John. I've got a question from Slido, just inquiring whether or not the hugely rich data set you've accumulated is feeding into the decision support tools underneath RAP.
Not at this stage. So at the moment, all of this data we've been collecting is solely for the Site Stewardship Plan, but we are having conversations about where this data will, what it will feed into.
Fantastic, thank you.
Just quickly, Fitzroy and I noticed the first couple of those observations at the start, your key themes, very similar to protecting country in terms of leaving it in its natural state and managing it. But the question I had was, obviously, I think Nicole mentioned yesterday that tourism operators are in a business. So how have you found people in terms of providing that information? Like, was there a reluctance at the start to say, oh, is this going to take my niche away? Like someone that's been doing something in a patch for 15 years, they might not want to give up some of that information, I would think. So was there a bit of a reluctance to go, why are we doing this project?
I thought there would be, honestly. Maybe I was persuasive enough. But in the end, no one has had any issues giving up the information. Ultimately it's their plan. So this is a resource for the tourism operator, and the more information they can put in, the more they can get out of it as a business. And obviously these plans aren't public. Some of the information we've been given permission to show you today. But yeah, ultimately, because it is their resource, they were happy to give up that information, which has been great.